Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. The hallway was still bathed in the soft amber of morning light, slicing gently through the blinds and falling onto the cool kitchen tile. A kettle hummed faintly in the background, and the scent of toasted bread mingled with the citrus tang of freshly pressed orange juice. Asher Lowell stood at the counter, one hand gripping his coffee mug, the other adjusting the sleeve of his shirt. Breakfast was simple, just how Silas liked it. 2 eggs, slightly runny, buttered toast cut diagonally, and a small pile of strawberries. He glanced at the clock, 6:47 a.m. Right on schedule. But something felt off. He set the mug down and walked upstairs toward Silas's room, the floor creaking under his polished shoes. The house was quiet, eerily so. As he opened the door, the gentle sound of whimpering reached his ears, a sound that pierced deeper than any alarm ever could. Silas was curled tightly beneath his covers, face contorted in distress. His small hands clenched the edge of his Batman comforter, and soft sobs escaped his trembling lips. Asher's heart dropped. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. "Buddy," he whispered, brushing a lock of damp hair off Silas's forehead. "Hey, it's okay. Wake up, it's just a dream." Silas jolted awake at the touch, his eyes wide, red-rimmed, and disoriented. But the moment he registered his father's face, he lunged forward and threw his arms around Asher's neck.
Dad,
He cried, voice cracking. "Dad, I waited and waited, but you never came." Asher's brows furrowed. What do you mean, bud?" Silas pulled back just enough to look at him, eyes brimming with tears. "In my dream, I was at school. You told me you'd come pick me up, but everyone else left and I just sat there, alone." Asher exhaled, guilt wrapping around him like a vice.
"Oh, buddy, it was just a bad dream.
"I'm here.
I've got you."
But Silas shook his head, more awake now and more serious. "You say that all the time, Dad. But last night was my birthday. You didn't come home." Asher froze. Silas's bottom lip quivered. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Asher said immediately, wrapping his son tighter.
"No, Silas.
"You didn't do anything wrong. I got stuck at work."
I'm sorry."
Silas pulled away, shoulders slumping. "Mom made cupcakes, and she lit a candle even though you weren't there. I waited until it melted all the way down." Asher looked away for a second, throat tightening. "I want us to eat dinner together," Silas continued. "Like my friend V's family. Even just once. And can we go to the bounce house on Saturday? You said we would last time." Asher nodded slowly. "We will. I promise. Tonight, we're all eating dinner together. And Saturday, bounce house. Just you and me. Deal?" Silas didn't smile. "You've said that before." The words cut deeper than Asher expected. "I know. But this time I mean it. I'll be home early. You can even pick what we eat." Silas eyed him warily, as if wanting to believe, but too worn down to trust it. "Okay," he whispered finally. Asher gave him a gentle pat. "Now come on, let's get ready for school. Breakfast is downstairs." Silas climbed out of bed and trudged to the bathroom. Asher remained kneeling for a few moments, staring blankly at the plush rug. His son had just called him out, with more grace and honesty than most adults could muster. And the worst part? Silas wasn't wrong. He stood slowly and made his way back to the kitchen. The toast was cold. His coffee had gone bitter. But he didn't care. His mind was spinning. When had he started missing everything? The recitals, the family dinners, the Sunday afternoon walks? When had his wife stopped asking when he'd be home and just started preparing for him not to be? Asher had always thought of himself as a provider,
A responsible man.
a man who got things done. He handed Rachel the checkbook, the insurance papers, the health coverage, the bills. He thought he was doing his part. And in many ways, he was. But somewhere along the way, he had begun confusing success with presents. And presents wasn't something that could be wired into a bank account or sent home in a gift bag from an out-of-town business trip. It was something you had to show up for. Rachel watched from the stairs, half hidden behind the wooden banister. She had heard everything. Silas's cries. The disappointment in his voice. Asher's stumbling apology. She didn't interrupt, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. There was a time when she'd rush down, embrace them both, and declare a family breakfast.
But now,
all she could feel was hollow. She turned away quietly, walking back into the bedroom and closing the door behind her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Harlow, her college roommate and only real confidant these days. Morning, sunshine, sun with face, how's your little guy today? She started to type, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? He had a nightmare. Cried about his dad. Again. Same story. Same ache. Same silence. She erased the message. Too bitter for the morning. Instead, she typed, he's okay. Just a rough night. Coffee's not strong enough. And hit send. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the lawn glistened with dew, and the neighbor's dog barked as the mail truck rolled by. From the outside, her life probably looked perfect. Inside, it felt like she was watching her family through soundproof glass, visible but out of reach. In the driveway, Asher sat in the car longer than he needed to. Silas was buckled in the back seat, fiddling with his sticker book. The morning playlist was humming quietly through the speakers. But Asher wasn't listening. He glanced at the rearview mirror. Hey, buddy. Yeah, I'm really sorry about last night. I want you to know, I'm gonna try harder, okay? Silas gave a soft nod, but didn't look up. Okay, Dad. And then, you should say sorry to Mom, too. The words were simple. So simple. But they struck Asher like lightning. He nodded. You're right. I will. At Meadowlark Academy, Silas gave his dad a quick hug and disappeared through the double doors. Asher waited until he vanished into the hallway before starting the engine again. On the way to the office, he passed the same landmarks he always did, the gas station on 7th, the bakery Rachel used to love before she stopped indulging in treats, the bookstore she once browsed while he sipped cold brew on the bench outside. He'd driven past them 100 times. Today, he noticed them. Today, he noticed everything. He was beginning to realize what hurt more than a fight or even anger. What hurt most was being forgotten quietly, while everyone kept smiling. And somewhere deep in his gut, Asher knew, if something didn't change soon, that nightmare of Silas's might become reality. A father who never came. A family that no longer waited. A home that no longer felt like home. The house used to hum. Not loudly but softly, like a gentle tune that played in the background of everything. It was the clink of dishes, the echo of a child's laughter, the shuffle of socked feet over hardwood. It was the sound of life, of a family living not just in proximity, but in presence. Now silence had moved in. It wasn't always cold. In the early days, their home had been filled with late-night kitchen dances and warm pancakes on rainy Sundays. Asher would wrap his arms around Lyra while she stirred batter, humming off-key to whatever vinyl he was spinning on the turntable. Silas was still a baby then, all gummy grins and sleepy eyes. Lyra remembered those mornings like they belonged to someone else. She sat now at the edge of the bed, the navy comforter bunched at her waist. The room was still dim. She hadn't turned the lights on after Asher left. There didn't seem to be a point. In her lap, her phone lit up with a message from her mom. Let me know when you want us to visit. We miss our little man. Love you. Lyra typed a quick response. Maybe next week. I'll check the schedule. She didn't know whose schedule she was referring to. Asher's was always full. Hers, well, she hadn't made one in years. Once upon a time, Lyra had a career. A real one. She was an art director for a boutique branding agency in Seattle. Deadlines, client calls, creative briefs, it had been chaotic but fulfilling. After Silas was born, She chose to step away. She didn't regret that decision. What she did regret was becoming invisible. Not to her son. Silas saw her, clung to her, adored her. But to Asher? Somewhere between promotions, business dinners, and late-night proposals, she had become background noise. There were nights she sat on the living room couch, a book open in her lap, pretending to read as the clock ticked past 9 o'clock. Then 10 o'clock. Then 11 o'clock. She used to text him. Still at the office? Everything okay? Should I wait for dinner? Eventually the text stopped. Eventually, the waiting stopped too. Now, she just made dinner for two. Silas always asked where Daddy was. She tried not to sound bitter in her answers. Work, sweetheart. Daddy's working late again. And Silas, sweet Silas, would nod solemnly and accept it. Children are adaptable. They get used to absence faster than they should. Lyra stood and walked into the hallway. The framed photos lining the wall were dusty. She paused at one near the stairs, a snapshot from a summer trip to Cannon Beach. Silas was 3, covered in sand and chocolate ice cream. Asher had him on his shoulders, both of them laughing. Lyra beside them in sunglasses and a straw hat, arm wrapped around Asher's waist. That was 4 years ago. The memory felt faded, not just in the photo, but in her bones. She walked downstairs and opened the fridge. Leftover soup, a few eggs, half a carton of almond milk. She wasn't hungry, but she made herself an omelet anyway. She knew how quickly skipping meals could turn into skipping self-care altogether. While the pan sizzled, she turned on the speaker. A playlist started, lo-fi beats, mellow and unobtrusive. She used to love jazz in the morning. These days, anything with lyrics felt like too much. As she plated her breakfast, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Mom. Silas stood there. Hair still a mess from sleep, one sock on, the other dangling from his hand. He rubbed his eyes. Hey, baby. You're up early. He padded over to the counter and sat on one of the stools. Did Dad go to work already? Lyra nodded, setting a small plate in front of him.
Yeah.
He left just before you got up. Silas didn't look surprised. He said he was going to eat dinner with us. Lyra forced a smile. Maybe tonight. Silas took a bite of toast, then looked up at her with eyes far too wise for 6 years old. You don't believe him either, do you? The words caught her off guard. What makes you say that? You never said a third plate. She stood still for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Out of the mouths of babes. She sat down beside him, resting her chin in her hand. I used to, but I guess I just don't want to waste dishes. Silas chewed quietly. When I have a family, I'll always eat dinner with them. Lyra smiled softly, brushing his hair back. You'll be a great dad one day. I'll never make my kid wait. She blinked quickly, hiding the tears that rose. I know you won't. After breakfast. She packed Silas's lunch and walked him to school. The air was crisp, the sky overcast, Seattle weather in its purest form. At the school gate, he kissed her cheek and ran inside without looking back. Lyra lingered for a moment before turning around. She used to go home and clean. Laundry, vacuuming, tidying toys, organizing bills. But today, she turned right instead of left. She walked 2 blocks and stepped into a coffee shop she hadn't visited in months.
Vilu ember.
It still smelled like cinnamon rolls and roasted beans. Lyra, a voice said. She turned.
Callie.
The barista with lavender hair and a nose ring smiled behind the counter. Oh my God, it's been forever. Lyra smiled, genuinely. Too long. You still remember my order? Almond milk chai. Dash of honey. Still perfect. As she waited, she glanced around. Students, freelancers, moms with toddlers. She used to be one of them. She used to write here, sketch, design mood boards.
Now.
Even holding a laptop felt foreign. Her drink arrived. She sat by the window, hands curled around the warm cup. Through the glass, people moved, lives unfolding, ordinary and beautiful. She thought about Rachel from before. The woman who wore red lipstick on Tuesdays for no reason. The one who danced barefoot in the kitchen. The one who once asked Asher to run away to Paris on a whim, and he almost said yes. That version of her had gone quiet. Not dead. Just buried. Later that afternoon, Lyra picked up Silas. They stopped by the market, picked out groceries, and made spaghetti together. He insisted on grating the Parmesan. She let him, even though it ended up everywhere. The table was set for two. Silas didn't ask about his dad this time. They ate while watching an old animated movie. Afterward, they curled up on the couch, and Lyra read aloud from Charlotte's Web. Silas fell asleep in her lap. She carried him upstairs, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead. "Good night, my heart." Back downstairs, she stared at her phone.
No texts.
No missed calls. At 10:12 p.m., Asher walked through the door, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, tie loose. "You're home," she said quietly. He paused in the hallway, unsure if she was angry or relieved. "Long meeting. Ran late." She nodded. "There's food in the fridge. Spaghetti." "Thanks." He walked into the kitchen, reheated a plate, and ate silently. Lyra stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "How was your day?" he asked. She considered lying. "It was fine." He nodded, chewing. She watched him like she was watching someone else's life. Silas asked if you'd be home for dinner. Asher stopped chewing. "I know. I told him I would. But you weren't. I didn't plan for the meeting to run over. You never do." Silence. He looked up. "Lyra, I'm trying." "I know," she interrupted. "You're always trying. But do you ever stop and ask yourself if trying is enough?" He didn't answer. She walked toward the stairs. "Good night, Asher." As he finished his food alone, the house echoed with nothingness. No music.
No laughter.
No light flickering in the corner. Just a man at a table. And a woman upstairs wondering when exactly her heart went silent. The first sign was subtle, a flushed cheek during story time, a faint shiver as Silas curled deeper into his blanket. Lyra reached out to adjust the comforter and felt the unmistakable heat radiating from his forehead. "Sweetheart," she whispered, brushing his damp curls aside. "Are you feeling okay?" Silas blinked up at her, cheeks bright red, eyes glassy. "My throat hurts. A lot." Lyra's stomach tightened. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead.
Burning.
Not just warm, scorching. "Okay," she said calmly. "Let's get you out of those pajamas and into something lighter, all right?" Silas nodded weakly. It was already close to 9 p.m. The house was dim, the sky outside deepening to a moody indigo. Lyra helped her son sit up, changed him gently, and wrapped him in a lighter cotton sheet. She went downstairs to grab the thermometer and a bottle of children's Tylenol. The beep of the thermometer moments later confirmed what she feared, 103.7. Her first instinct was to call Asher. But she didn't. Not at first. Instead, she held Silas against her chest, rocking him gently in the chair by the window. She whispered soft nothings, reassurances she didn't fully believe but knew he needed to hear. "You're okay, baby. We've got this. Just a bug. You'll feel better soon." Silas's skin was hot against her own, his breathing shallow, and every few minutes, he coughed, a dry, rasping sound that made her nerves fray one strand at a time. She grabbed her phone. Dialed. No answer. She waited a minute and called again. Still no answer. She tried one more time. Voicemail. "Hi, it's me. Silas has a high fever. I'm thinking of taking him in. Call me back, okay?" She hung up, eyes flicking to the clock, 9:27 p.m. Still no response by 9:45. By 10 o'clock, Silas was whimpering. Lyra didn't wait anymore. She threw a hoodie over her tank top, slipped on sandals, and wrapped Silas in a blanket. She grabbed her bag and keys in one hand, her child in the other. The Tylenol hadn't made a dent, and fear had started whispering things in her ear. She buckled him into his seat gently, his head lolled to the side. She kissed his forehead, whispered again, "Mom's got you," and drove through the dark streets of Seattle toward West Ridge Medical. The ER was quiet for once. A blessing. Lyra walked in holding Silas tightly against her shoulder. The triage nurse took one look and ushered them to the front of the line. After taking his temperature, still 103.5, and logging symptoms, they were guided to a small room under dim lights. A pediatrician came in moments later. "We're going to get his fever down and run a few tests," she said kindly. "He's responsive, which is good. Likely viral, but we'll keep him overnight just to monitor." Lyra nodded. Relief and anxiety tangled in her chest like two wires crossed too tightly. As they prepped Silas with a cool compress and 4 fluids, Lyra sat in the plastic chair beside the bed, legs curled up, eyes fixed on his pale face. She held his small hand in hers. Every time he stirred, she whispered gently, "I'm right here." Time passed like molasses. Midnight. 1 a.m. Still no call from Asher. At 2:03 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text.
Sorry.
"Just saw your messages. Are you still up?" Her hands trembled. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding with something between anger and sadness. She finally typed, "I'm at the hospital. Silas has a 103 fever. I called you 3 times. They're running tests. We're staying overnight." There was a pause. Then, "I'm so sorry. I had to go out with the clients. They kept ordering drinks. I didn't see the calls until now." She stared at that text for a long time. The word clients felt like a slap. You could have stepped outside. You could have checked your phone. No reply. He kept asking for you. You weren't here. Silence. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't even realize tears were slipping down her face until one dropped onto the back of Silas's hand. The pediatric nurse walked in softly. "You okay, Mom?" Lyra wiped her face.
Yes.
"Just tired. Why don't you lie down for a bit? We'll keep an eye on him." "I'm fine," she said, her voice hoarse. "I want to stay." The nurse gave her a small nod and left the room. At 3:17 a.m., Lyra opened the hospital window slightly. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of nearby trees and distant concrete. She leaned her forehead against the glass. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself cry. Quietly, fiercely, not just for Silas, but for herself, for the exhaustion, for the weight she carried every single day, for the empty side of the bed, for the man who once ran red lights just to see her smile and now couldn't bother to check his phone while drinking with clients. She wasn't asking for everything. She was just asking not to be alone. By sunrise, Silas's fever had dropped to 101. The nurse came in with soft hospital pancakes and a cartoon on the monitor. He stirred awake, blinking slowly. "Where are we?" "The hospital," Lyra whispered, running her fingers through his hair. "You were really warm last night, but you're okay now. We're just gonna stay here a little longer." He nodded. "You stayed with me all night?" "Of course I did." He looked around. "Is Dad here?" Lyra swallowed. "No, baby. Not yet." Silas stared at the ceiling. "He must be really busy."
Yeah,
she whispered, but even that felt like a lie now. At 7:23 a.m., Asher showed up at the hospital. He looked terrible. Shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed, eyes red. He walked quickly to the room and paused in the doorway. Lyra was sitting beside Silas, braiding a makeshift crown from hospital wristbands. She looked up when she saw him. Their eyes met. There was no yelling.
no dramatic outburst.
Just silence. The kind that carried weight. "Is he okay?" Asher asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "They think it's viral. He'll be fine. They just wanted to keep him overnight." Asher exhaled. He stepped into the room and approached the bed. "Hey, buddy." Silas turned his head, offering a weak smile. "Dad." Asher reached out, stroked his hair. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." "It's okay," Silas whispered. "Mom was." That single sentence landed harder than a scream. Asher looked at Lyra again. "I didn't mean to." She stood. "You can sit with him."
I'm gonna go grab coffee.
"Lyra."
She didn't respond.
She walked past him, out the door, and into the hallway. The vending machine hummed beside her as she stood with a cheap styrofoam cup of instant cappuccino. She stared down at the floor tiles, hands wrapped tightly around the cup. She wanted to feel something, but she was too numb. She didn't even know if she was angry anymore. She just felt done. There were so many small cracks leading up to this moment. And now, she could feel it. The fracture.
The shift.
The irreversible knowledge that she had faced the night alone and survived it. There was no grand betrayal.
No a fight.
No broken vow. Just a man who vanished when she needed him most. And that somehow hurt worse. Later that afternoon, they returned home. Silas was still groggy, but smiling. Lyra helped him into bed, fluffed his pillows, kissed his cheek. Asher hovered nearby, unsure what to do. Lyra turned to him. You should get some rest. I'll stay with him. She nodded. But as she passed him in the hallway, she didn't touch his arm. She didn't look back. And that night, when he slipped into bed beside her, she didn't speak. She faced the wall, her breath steady. The bed was no longer empty, but it still felt cold. The room was too bright. Asher winced as sunlight poured through the hotel window, slicing across his face like a silent reprimand. His head throbbed, cotton heavy. The kind of ache only cheap whiskey and guilt could conjure. He sat up slowly. The room was still. His phone, face down on the nightstand, vibrated once, then went quiet again. He grabbed it with shaky fingers. 6 missed calls. 4 from Lyra. 2 from the hospital. His chest tightened. He scrolled further. Messages. Silas has a 103 fever. I'm thinking of taking him in. Call me back, okay? We're at West Ridge. They're running tests. We're staying overnight. And then, nearly 2 hours later, you weren't here. Asher's throat dried. He remembered the night in fragments, the endless toasts, the forced laughter, the constant pressure to impress. Clients from Boston. Old school guys who refused to take no for an answer. Every refusal to drink was met with an elbow jab and a raised brow. Eventually he caved. As always. Now he was in a hotel room, fully clothed, with a bitter taste in his mouth and the crushing weight of failure on his chest. He didn't even remember leaving the dinner. Didn't remember the cab ride. Didn't remember ignoring his wife's calls. But he had. And now, he had to face it. By the time Asher reached West Ridge Medical, it was just after 7 a.m. He hadn't gone home to change. He didn't brush his teeth. He didn't care. He rushed to the front desk, gave his son's name, and followed the nurse's directions with robotic urgency. When he stepped into the hospital room, he found Lyra sitting beside Silas's bed, folding a crumpled wristband into the shape of a tiny bird. Silas was asleep, cheeks still flushed, lips slightly parted. Lyra looked up. Their eyes met.
She didn't stand, didn't speak.
Just looked at him for a long, hollow moment. Is he okay? Asher finally asked, his voice hoarse. Lyra nodded. Viral fever. He's responding to meds now. They wanted to monitor him overnight. Asher exhaled and moved to the bed. He ran his fingers through Silas's hair, the boy's skin cool now under his touch. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Lyra's expression didn't change. I texted you 4 times. I know, I called. I didn't see it. I know, she said, but there was no forgiveness in her tone. Only quiet confirmation. You were drinking with clients. Asher said nothing. I'll get coffee, she said, rising. You can sit with him. And just like that, she was gone. The chair beside Silas felt unfamiliar, like a guest seat in a home he used to own. Asher watched his son sleep, then slowly looked around the room. The cartoon channel was muted. A half-eaten fruit cup sat on the bedside tray. A juice box. A crumpled drawing. Stick figures labeled Mom and Me in big wobbly letters.
No, that.
The omission stabbed deeper than he expected. He leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. He had thought his absence was manageable, that his long nights, his excuses, his rescheduled plans were just temporary, that he was building a better future for all of them, that Lyra understood. But now he saw it clearly. He wasn't building anything. He was watching it crumble. And he was the one swinging the hammer. Later that afternoon, after discharge papers were signed and bags packed, they returned home. Silas, still tired, leaned his head on Lyra's shoulder as she carried him up the porch steps. Asher reached to help, but Lyra adjusted her grip on instinct, moving ahead without him. He followed in silence. Inside, the house was unchanged, but it felt different. Colder. Asher watched Lyra guide Silas upstairs to his room, murmuring softly. He lingered in the hallway, unsure of what to do with himself. When she came back down, he tried to speak. "I should have been there." Lyra looked at him, expression unreadable. "But you weren't." He nodded, shame rising like bile. "I didn't even know until I woke up this morning," he added. "I blacked out." "That's never happened before." Lyra crossed her arms, leaning against the banister. "That's the problem, Asher. You didn't even know. You were gone, and we had to keep going without you." Her voice cracked slightly, but her face stayed calm. He took a step toward her. "Let me make it up to you."
To him. Please.
She shook her head gently. "This isn't about a one-time fix. Or flowers. Or breakfast in bed. This is years. Of late dinners. Missed birthdays. Broken promises. I've been raising a child and holding up a marriage with one hand while the other clutched an empty space beside me." Asher's heart thundered in his chest. "I never meant for it to be like this." "No one ever does," she replied. Then she walked past him, into the kitchen, leaving him standing alone. That night, Asher laid beside her in bed. She faced the wall. He stared at the ceiling. The silence was no longer just uncomfortable, it was devastating. It said everything they didn't. He reached out, placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't move. After a moment, he withdrew it, rolled onto his back, and stared at the dark until sleep finally took him. The next morning, Asher rose early. He brewed coffee, toasted bagels, sliced strawberries. He even scrambled eggs the way Silas liked, soft and buttery. He placed everything on the table just as Lyra came downstairs, already dressed, her hair tied up, a neutral look on her face. Silas followed in his pajamas, dragging a stuffed dragon by its tail. "Breakfast," Asher offered, hopeful. Silas smiled a little. "You made eggs?"
Yeah, sure. For you.
"Thought I'd start the day with you guys." They sat, the three of them, for the first time in what felt like forever. Conversation was light, mostly about cartoons. But Asher noticed Lyra didn't ask how he slept, didn't smile when he refilled her mug. After breakfast, he offered to drive Silas to school. Lyra agreed without comment. It felt like something, but also not enough. When they returned home that night, Silas burst through the front door holding a drawing. "I made this for you, Dad." Asher knelt to take it, eyes widening. It was a picture of their family. 3 stick figures again. But this time, a small heart sat above them. Me, Mom, and Dad. He felt tears rise. "Thanks, buddy. This is going on the fridge." He turned to show Lyra, but she had already disappeared upstairs. He stared at the drawing again. A heart. Still there. Still beating. But barely. The forest trail curled along the base of the mountains like a ribbon unraveling. Tall evergreens loomed overhead, their shadows dancing in the dappled sunlight. Silas ran ahead on the dirt path, a backpack twice the size of his torso bouncing with every step. "Stay where we can see you," Asher called. "I am," Silas yelled back, not turning around. Lyra trailed a few steps behind Asher, hands in the pockets of her fleece jacket, her eyes fixed on the pine needle-covered path beneath her boots. This trip was Asher's idea. He booked the campground at Juniper Ridge, packed the sleeping bags, even bought marshmallows without being reminded. It was the first family outing they'd had in almost a year. He had planned it like a man desperate to stitch back what had frayed, carefully, anxiously, a little too late. At the picnic site, Silas dropped his bag and ran toward the fire pit, where a circle of logs waited like old friends. "This is awesome," he declared. Asher smiled. "Glad you like it, bud." Lyra didn't speak. She unpacked the cooler, laying out the food, wiping the bench with a cloth. Her movements were quiet, mechanical. They set up the tent together. The same tent they'd used on their honeymoon road trip up the Oregon coast. Back when everything was still stitched with laughter and long kisses under open skies. Now, the silence between them stretched taut. As night fell, they sat around the campfire. Silas roasted a marshmallow, face glowing orange in the flickering flame. "Tell a story," he said, mouth sticky with sugar. "Dad, tell the one about the raccoon that stole your burger." Asher chuckled, launching into the tale, how a rogue raccoon had snuck into their campsite during a storm and made off with an entire cheeseburger. Silas laughed so hard he nearly dropped his stick. Lyra smiled faintly, but said nothing. After Silas curled up in his sleeping bag inside the tent, they stayed by the fire. The air was cool. Smoke curled upward into the starlit sky. The only sounds were crackling wood and the distant hoot of an owl. Asher broke the silence first. "He had a good day," he said softly. "He did," Lyra replied, her voice even. "I'm glad we came." She nodded. The fire popped, sending a stray ember upward like a signal flare. "I've been trying," Asher added, glancing at her, "to be better." "I know," she said. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been thinking a lot. About what I've missed. About how I made you carry everything. And I'm sorry." Lyra didn't move. "Back at the hospital. When you said you were alone, I heard it. Really heard it." She exhaled slowly, staring at the flames. "It wasn't the hospital that broke me." He waited. "It was all the days before that." She continued. "The birthday dinners you missed. The nights you came home smelling like whiskey and regret. The mornings you said, 'We'll talk later,' and never did." "I thought I was doing it for us," he said quietly. "That's what broke me, Asher," she replied. "You kept saying it was for us, but you never asked what we actually needed." He looked down. "What do you need now?" There was a pause. Then she said it. "I don't need love." The words sat heavy between them. Asher lifted his head slowly. "What?" "I don't need love," she repeated, calmly. "Not from you. Not anymore." He stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. "Lyra, I need peace. I need rest. I need to stop holding my breath, waiting for promises that never come true." His voice cracked. "I love you." She turned to him, eyes full of something that wasn't anger, but wasn't warmth either. "I know. That's the part that hurts." They sat in silence again, the fire flickering lower. Asher wanted to scream, to beg, to fall on his knees in the dirt and promise forever, like a man in a movie. But nothing came out, because somewhere deep inside, he knew he hadn't just disappointed her. He'd taught her how to live without him. And now that she'd learned, she didn't want to unlearn it. Later that night, Lyra sat alone at the edge of the lake near their tent, watching moonlight ripple on the water's surface. Asher joined her, footsteps quiet over the rocks. He didn't sit too close. "Remember our first trip here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. "You made me eat Bernese mores and said they were artisan." Lyra chuckled softly. "You pretended they were amazing." "They were," he lied. Silence again. "Do you ever think," she asked, "that we grew into different people, but kept pretending we hadn't?" "I think I stopped seeing the person you were becoming," he said. "And you stopped waiting for me to notice." She nodded, eyes still on the lake. "I miss you," he said. "Even when you're right next to me." "I miss me too," she replied. He closed his eyes. "I want to fix this." She didn't answer. "I know that sounds simple. And I know it's not. But I want to try." Lyra finally turned to face him. "I believe that you want to. I just don't know if I have the strength to keep hoping you will." The quiet that followed wasn't cold. It was just final. In the morning, they packed up in silence. Silas, unaware of the undercurrent, chatted about chipmunks and tree sap and the way the stars looked like sugar spilled across the sky. Asher carried the tent. Lyra folded blankets. Silas ran ahead, pretending a stick was a lightsaber. On the drive home, the car was quiet. Lyra stared out the window. Silas fell asleep in the back seat, and Asher kept his eyes on the road, hands gripped tight on the wheel, not because of the traffic, but because he was afraid of where they were heading. Not just down I-90, but toward a version of life where he was no longer part of her dreams, just a fading presence in the rearview mirror. Asher started waking up before the sun. He no longer hit snooze 3 times. He no longer rolled over and checked emails before brushing his teeth. Instead, he made coffee for Lyra black, no sugar, and left it on the kitchen counter with a yellow post-it note folded into a heart. Sometimes she drank it. Most days, she didn't. He picked Silas up from school twice a week. Sometimes 3. He'd wait outside the brick building while the kids spilled out, laughing and spinning in the afternoon light. When Silas spotted him, his face always lit up. "Hey, Dad," he'd yell, racing over. "You remembered." Asher would smile and ruffle his hair. Always. It wasn't true, not always.
But it was now.
He left the office at 5 sharp. Skipped drinks with clients. Rescheduled a conference trip so he could attend Silas's class art show. Took over bedtime reading, even if Silas requested the same story 4 nights in a row. He cooked dinner once a week, actual food, not just frozen pizza. He watered the plants. He showed up. He really, truly showed up. And still, Lyra's eyes didn't soften. She noticed everything. How he folded the laundry without being asked. How he offered to drive her to appointments. How he restocked the pantry and checked expiration dates and vacuumed behind the couch. But she also noticed how hard he was trying. And that was the problem. Because none of it felt natural anymore. It felt like a man trying to earn a second chance in a marriage that had already bled dry. Like makeup over a scar. On a Tuesday afternoon, Asher brought home tulips. They were Lyra's favorite, coral and peach with long green stems. He remembered that from their second anniversary, when he surprised her with 27 of them because 27 just feels cooler than 25. He placed them in a tall glass vase on the dining table. That night, she walked in from work, dropped her keys in the tray, and paused when she saw them. "They're beautiful," she said. "I remembered," he replied with a smile. Lyra nodded, then walked into the kitchen to start the rice. She didn't ask where he bought them. She didn't say, "Thank you."
She didn't even look at him again.
At night, they still slept in the same bed. But her back always faced him. Asher had stopped trying to reach for her. The first time he had, her body flinched so subtly, he hadn't been sure if it was real. But the silence that followed had been loud enough. Instead, he lay awake most nights, listening to her breathe, wondering what she dreamed about now, wondering if he was in any of those dreams. On the first Saturday of spring, Asher rented bikes. He remembered how Lyra used to love cycling through the park. Before Silas. Before his promotion. Before everything became a race they didn't agree to run. He planned the whole day, packed sandwiches, bought a juice box with Silas's favorite cartoon on it. Even downloaded a playlist of songs Lyra used to hum in the shower. It was sunny mid-60s. The cherry blossoms had started to open. "Just us," he said that morning. "Like old times." Lyra hesitated in the doorway. "I have a Zoom meeting with a client this afternoon." "I checked your schedule. It's blocked off." "I made lunch." "Silas is excited." She looked past him, to the bikes on the car rack.
To the blue sky.
"Okay," she said finally, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. They biked slowly along the trail. Silas rode ahead, weaving between other families and couples, shouting every time he spotted a squirrel or duck. Asher and Lyra trailed behind. It should have felt like a scene from before, but it didn't. They stopped beneath a tree to rest. Asher offered her water. She took it, sipped once, and handed it back. "How's work?" he asked. "Busy." "Your new client, the home design one. You said they were difficult." She blinked. "They still are." He nodded. "You'll handle it. You always do." She gave a polite smile, then turned her gaze to Silas chasing a butterfly near the pond. "Do you want to talk?" he asked, quieter now. "About us?"
She didn't respond.
"I know it's been hard. I know I caused a lot of this. But I'm trying, Lyra. I'm showing up. I'm learning.
I see that, she said softly.
Then what's missing? Lyra took a breath. It's not what's missing. It's what already left. Asher swallowed. You don't love me anymore. I don't know, she replied. I've been numb for so long. I don't know what I feel. Can we find our way back? I don't know that either. Her honesty was a cold hand on his chest. He looked away, blinking hard. Silas ran up, breathless. Can we go see the turtles? Please, please, please. Asher wiped his eyes quickly.
Bull.
Let's go. Lyra walked ahead with their son, and Asher trailed behind. Again. That night, after Silas went to bed, Asher stood in the kitchen, staring at the tulips. One petal had started to curl. The water had gone cloudy. He changed it without being asked. Lyra came down the stairs, wearing a faded sweatshirt, her hair damp from a shower. She reached for a glass, filled it with water, and leaned against the counter. Did you have fun today? He asked. Silas did. Did you? She didn't answer. I miss this, he said. I know. I miss us. I know, she repeated softer. Asher took a step closer. Do you want to try again? Lyra met his eyes. What does again look like to you? Dinner together. Date nights. Talking. Maybe therapy. Letting each other in. She exhaled. I don't want to hurt you, Asher. But I don't think I can give you what you're asking for. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The words were gentle, but they shattered something inside him. The next morning, Asher didn't make coffee. He didn't leave a post-it. He just sat on the porch, staring out at the quiet street, his hands folded in his lap. Silas came out with a cereal bowl and sat beside him. Are you and Mom okay? The boy asked. Asher forced a smile. We're working on it. Silas nodded. You're here a lot more now. I'm trying. I like it when you're here. Asher looked at his son, at the tiny version of himself who deserved more than half-effort love and broken promises. I like being here, he said. And it was true. The days continued. Asher kept showing up. He helped Silas with homework, painted the bathroom Lyra once said felt claustrophobic beige, paid attention to the details he used to miss. But every smile from her was polite. Every laugh was short. Every touch absent. The cold wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply permanent. One night, Asher found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone. Vacations. Birthdays. A selfie of Lyra in bed with Silas asleep on her chest, her smile barefaced and sleepy. He missed that smile more than he missed anything. It used to be his lighthouse. Now it was a relic. He closed the gallery and set the phone down, then turned off the light, and faced his side of the bed alone. He still wasn't ready to let go, but he was starting to realize. She already had. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and hope. Asher stood at the counter, painstakingly icing a 2-layer chocolate cake that looked slightly lopsided but was still the proudest thing he'd baked in years. Silas's favorite superhero was drawn on top with blue frosting, crooked and cartoonish. He'd stayed up until 1 a.m. perfecting it. Now, the morning sun was creeping through the blinds, casting warm stripes across the tiled floor. And the house felt different, lighter, somehow. It was Silas's 7th birthday. And for once, Asher had taken the entire day off.
No meetings. No emails. No excuses.
He'd made pancakes shaped like stars, decorated the living room with streamers and balloons. He even hung the happy birthday banner upside down on purpose, something Lyra used to do when Silas was a toddler just to make him laugh. Asher glanced at the clock. 7:13 a.m. He heard footsteps upstairs. Then a voice. Is today the day? Silas shouted, already halfway down the stairs in mismatched pajamas, eyes wide with excitement. It is, Asher said, grinning. The boy gasped when he saw the decorations. You did all this? Asher nodded. All by myself. Silas ran forward, wrapping his arms around his dad's waist. This is the best birthday ever. Asher bent down, pulled his son into a tighter hug. You deserve the best. Lyra came downstairs a little later, dressed in soft gray linen and a simple necklace Silas had made from beads last year. She paused when she saw the kitchen.
The cake.
The presents. The pancakes. The boy dancing barefoot in the living room. And Asher, holding a balloon in one hand and a roll of tape in the other. Their eyes met. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. But she smiled, small and slow. And for the first time in months, it wasn't forced. The morning passed in a joyful blur. Silas tore open gifts with dramatic gasps. He screamed with delight when he found the remote control car from the catalog he'd circled back in January. Asher had driven across town to find it. They took turns playing with it across the hardwood floor. Silas laughed until he cried when it crashed into the legs of the dining table. Asher laughed too. And Lyra, sitting on the couch, found herself laughing along without even realizing it. She hadn't felt this kind of ease in a long, long time. That afternoon, family and a few neighbors gathered for a backyard party. Silas's grandparents brought a homemade lemonade stand. His friend Caleb from school arrived with a sparkly slime kit. Lyra's sister showed up with enough cupcakes to feed a small army. The backyard bloomed with chatter and color, kids chasing bubbles, adults sipping coffee, folding chairs placed under a maple tree Asher had finally trimmed the week before. It was the kind of day Lyra used to imagine back when they first talked about having children. Back when the future still felt wide and full of soft possibilities. Asher stayed close, attentive without hovering. He refilled drinks, tied shoelaces, carried folding tables. And every so often, when Lyra looked over, he was already looking at her. But not in the way that asked for forgiveness. In the way that simply said, "I'm still here." When the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, casting golden light across the yard, Lyra brought out the cake. Silas clapped wildly. "It's perfect." Asher held the lighter, waiting as everyone gathered. "Make a wish, buddy," he said. Silas looked up, eyes sparkling. "I already got it." Everyone laughed. Asher lit the candles. 7 small flames danced in the breeze. They all sang. And Lyra, her voice soft but sure, sang too. As Silas leaned in and blew with all his might, the flames flickered out. Cheers erupted. But Asher wasn't watching the cake. He was watching Lyra. Because, for one brief second, when she looked at their son, her eyes shimmered. Not with sadness, but with something warmer. And when she turned to hand him a plate, she handed Asher one too. The guests left slowly. One by one, car doors closed, lights blinked on, and shadows faded into dusk. Lyra's sister hugged her goodbye and whispered something Asher couldn't hear. She smiled as she left. Then it was quiet again. The house was dim, the only sound the hum of the dishwasher and Silas playing quietly with his new toy in the next room. Asher stood at the sliding glass door, looking out at the backyard. Lyra came up behind him. She folded her arms. Didn't say anything. The silence was no longer bitter, just tentative. "You did a great job today," she said finally. He turned. "Thanks. I mean it." "I know." She hesitated, then added, "He's going to remember this birthday forever." "I hope so." Another pause. Then, quietly, "I will too." Asher blinked. "Yeah." She nodded. "I've never seen him so happy," she said. "He loves you, Lyra," he said, voice steady. "And so do I." She didn't flinch. She just looked at him, eyes gentle. "I know you do." "I'm not asking for anything tonight," he added. "No big speeches. No promises. I wanted this day to be perfect for him." She looked down at her feet. It was. When she looked back up, her expression had shifted. Less guarded, more tired. But not in a bitter way. In a way that said, "I'm still human." And without thinking, she reached out. Her fingers touched his. He stilled. Her hand closed around his. And then she stepped forward and hugged him. It was the first time she had let herself do it in months. Asher stood frozen for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her. Gently, carefully, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he held too tightly. She rested her head against his shoulder. Neither of them said a word. There was nothing to say. But in that quiet, something moved. A shift. A thaw. Not everything healed. Not everything forgiven. But something finally felt possible. Later that night, when Silas was asleep, mouth open, cheeks flushed from joy, Lyra stepped into the kitchen and found Asher packing away leftover cake. He glanced up, startled. "I was gonna clean up." "I know," she said. He stood there awkwardly, unsure if he should keep going or stop. Then she picked up a plate and started wrapping slices in foil. They worked side by side for the next 20 minutes, moving in comfortable silence. It was the kind of silence they hadn't shared in a long time. It didn't sting. It didn't shout. It just existed. When the last plate was put away, Lyra leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Asher wiped his hands on a towel. She looked at him. "I'm not ready to say we're okay." "I know, but I don't hate you." He smiled softly. "I didn't think you did." "I wanted to." He laughed, quiet and rough. "That makes two of us." Lyra shook her head, but she was smiling too now. "Let's just take this one day at a time." "I'll take whatever you give me," he said.
And he meant it.
They turned off the lights together, locking up the house, checking on their son, brushing past each other in the hallway like two people relearning how to be near. In bed, they still lay on opposite sides. But when the clock struck midnight, Lyra shifted and whispered, "Thank you for today." Asher turned, happy to do it. A pause.
"Good night," she said.
"Good night, Lyra." And in the darkness, the quiet felt less like distance, and more like space.
Room.
A bridge. Lyra stood in front of the mirror, tying her hair into a low bun. The morning sun had just begun to stream through the sheer curtains of the bedroom, painting soft gold across the duvet. She didn't rush, didn't check her phone, didn't feel the need to fill the quiet. In the distance, she heard Silas laughing from the living room.
A low,
steady hum of conversation. Asher's voice reading aloud, animated and warm. It sounded peaceful, strange, but not unwelcome. She picked up her earrings, simple gold hoops, and clipped them on. Today marked the start of her new project at the design firm. A client she had pitched herself. A space she envisioned and won. She hadn't shared much of it with Asher. Not because she was hiding it, but because she didn't know what parts of herself he still wanted to hear. But lately he'd started asking. And more importantly, he'd started listening.
Downstairs.
The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. Asher was at the stove, flipping slices of French toast. Silas sat at the counter, swinging his legs and sipping orange juice. "You're up early," Asher said without looking up. "Big day," she said, adjusting the collar of her blazer. "I know," he said, flipping the last slice onto a plate. "You got this." She raised an eyebrow. "You remembered?" "I listened," he replied, smiling. She smiled back. Not out of politeness, but because it felt real. The drive to the firm felt different. Lighter. The same traffic. The same streets. But inside the car, Lyra felt something loosened, like the knot in her chest had finally released enough to let her breathe without hurting. She thought about the night of Silas's birthday, about the quiet hug in the doorway, about the way she didn't flinch. She thought about the mornings that followed. No grand apologies.
No tillfällighetsbegging.
Just presence. Small things. Dishes done before she noticed. A note left in her planner. "Thanks for packing Silas's lunch." A charger plugged into her phone before bed. She'd stopped waiting for love to come back the way it left. But maybe, just maybe, it could return in a new form. That night, dinner was quiet. Not heavy. Just calm. Silas told stories from school. Lyra laughed when he mimicked his gym teacher's voice. Asher joined in, asking questions, keeping the rhythm. When Silas went to bed, Asher offered to clean up. "You cooked," Lyra said. "I'll help." They washed dishes side by side, sleeves rolled up, water running warm. They didn't talk much.
But they didn't need to.
When she reached for a plate and their hands touched, she didn't pull away. Later that week, Asher suggested a walk. Just the two of them. The air was crisp, early spring wind brushing through the trees. They strolled the old trail by the lake, the one they used to visit when Silas was a baby, asleep in a sling across Lyra's chest. Now the path felt longer. Or maybe they were just slower. "You've changed," she said after a while. Asher glanced sideways. "Is that a good thing?" "I think it is." He nodded, thoughtful. "I didn't know how far I'd let myself drift until I saw the shore again." Lyra looked out at the water. "I'm not sure we'll ever be who we were." "I know," he said. "But maybe we can be something new." She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. Some nights, they still slept apart. Not because of fights, just space. But some nights, she let him back into the bed they once shared, and on those nights, they didn't touch. They simply slept. But the silence between them no longer carried weight. It just existed. A kind of peace. A mutual understanding that rebuilding didn't mean rushing. That some ruins needed time before new foundations could be laid. Lyra started leaving notes too. Little things. A post-it on the fridge. "Thanks for packing Silas's lunch." A card slipped into his laptop bag. "You're a better father than you think." Asher didn't cry when he read them. But once, he lingered outside her home office door a little longer than usual, just listening to the sound of her typing, wanting to remember how it felt to simply be near her. On a rainy Thursday, Silas had a school performance. He played a sunflower in a play about pollination. Asher and Lyra sat side by side on a plastic bench in the second row. Their knees touched. Neither moved away. When Silas spotted them in the audience, his grin nearly split his face. After the show, he ran into their arms, wrapping one around each of them. "I saw you both," he whispered. "Right there." Lyra kissed his forehead. "We wouldn't miss it for the world." And for the first time, it wasn't a promise. It was the truth. One Sunday morning, Lyra sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and her sketchpad. Asher walked in quietly, holding a blanket. She looked up. "I noticed you left this on the couch," he said, draping it gently over her shoulders. "Thanks," she replied, pulling it closer. He didn't sit. Just stood there for a second. Then said, "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Lyra looked at him. "I've always been strong." He nodded. "I know that now." She paused. "You're gentler than I thought," she said. "Trying," he replied. And then, without thinking, she reached up and touched his hand. Not as a reward. Not as a signal. Just a quiet acknowledgement that he was still trying. And she was still watching. The seasons shifted again. More family dinners. More shared glances. More walks, not always together, but often ending in the same place. And the space between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a bridge. They didn't call it a second chance. They didn't label it starting over. Because truthfully, it wasn't. It was something entirely different. They knew now what silence could do, what absence could build, and what love required beyond the falling part. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't grand, but it was real. And sometimes, real was more powerful than perfect. One night, as they watched Silas asleep under the soft glow of his nightlight, Asher whispered, "Do you think we'll make it?" Lyra stared at their son's chest, rising and falling in quiet rhythm. "I think we already are," she said. Not in the old way, not the fairy tale way, but in a new kind of love. One built not on flawless days, but on flawed people choosing to stay, choosing to try, choosing to meet, not where they left off, but where they could begin again. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.